So let's let me do this all over again. Okay. My bad. My bad.
So
Okay, yes, let me do roll call again. Okay, sorry about that.
No
Chair
problem.
Hecht,
Here.
Commissioner Van Raes.
Here.
Commissioner Whedon.
Here.
Commissioner Nee.
Here.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Humayun. Here. Commissioner Liu.
Here.
Okay, let the record show that Commissioner Recht is absent and we have a quorum.
Excellent. Are there any public comments for items not on the agenda? Remind you, you can turn that lectern around if you want, or.
I'm right behind you. That's not gonna work.
Wherever you
We'll try this.
think.
Good evening, honored commissioners. I'm Gary Hedden, resident of Los Altos. I've been on the, actually with Greentown Los Altos since 2011. And so most of you know that, but for the benefit of the new member, I'll tell you a little bit about what we do at Greentown. We have several program areas. One of them is on clean air. And so there we want to electrify everything. And there, along that line, we have discussed it either an EV fair or an electrifying fair of some sort. And so that is still an ongoing topic of discussion. Biking. I biked here tonight, for example, and we do a lot of biking, try to lead by example. We also work with the schools. We have a WOW program, Walk or Wheels, and we go there and encourage the kids to ride their bikes or walk to school. One of the favorite things the kids do is get on the blender bike, where we have them pedal fast and whip up some fruit juice and ice, and it's the best drink ever. They really enjoy that. And it's catching on. 2-3 weeks ago, we had a WOW event at Cardinal Bullis Elementary, and we had, the school had 90% participation. That many kids are walking and biking to school. We do bike valet at the events around town, the Hearts and Wine Festival, for example. I lead a lot of bike rides. The one that's coming up next is the winter solstice night bike ride. Get on the bikes and head to Palo Alto and look at the lights. Another one is program areas reducing waste, and there it's recycle, reuse, repurpose, and refuse. Well, no, recycling is not all everything is cracked up to be, so there are other approaches there. And the plastic bag ban is something that we support. We have a very wonderful program, in my humble opinion, with summer interns. We've done this for 7 years. We get 4 to 6 interns working on projects that they can complete in 6 weeks. And one of the projects this past summer, I had 2 interns working on what does it take to become a member of Tree City USA. So they researched it and figured out what it would take. Gave all that information to Tanya, but more to the point, Rashina, thank you very much, has volunteered to fill out the application. So we're going to try to become a Tree City USA. And that brings me to something that I've been pretty passionate about, planting trees in town. I had to set a goal after 500 trees and spent 5 years. I'm at 483, so number 500 is around the corner. In fact, I've ordered it. It's now sitting at the Maintenance Service Center. It's a 5-foot by 5-foot box with a valley oak. Stands about 20-25 feet tall. We're going to get that planted at Lincoln Park. I've talked to the Rotary on a spot that they're comfortable with. Talked to Gabe England. He's okay with it. So we're going to plant that probably before I hit number 500, but it'll represent the 500 trees. So that's my report. Just to give you a little update. If you want to reach me, Gary at greentownlosaltos.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Anybody else? Any other comments, offline or otherwise? That's it. Okay. Next item is the election of the chair and the vice chair for the next year. So what is the formal process? Do we need to nominate?
You can elect a chair or vice chair. I think in the past, the commission has done it where the vice chair just becomes the chair. But it's anyone can appoint who, make an appointment and say, I want this person, and then go from there.
Well, I would like to nominate Rashina as chair.
Second that. Nominations? Okay. So then we can just go ahead and take a vote. Since we don't have anyone on virtual, we can just raise our hand. Is all in favor of Vice Chair Mayan becoming Chair Mayan? Please raise your hand. The motion passes. So now Vice Chair nominations.
I would nominate Carl as vice chair.
Any other nominations? Okay. All in favor to elect Commissioner Van Rice as Vice Chair? Please raise your hand. Okay. Commissioner Van Rice is now Vice Chair.
And with that, I do believe Rashina takes over.
Okay, so the next item is approved minutes of the meeting from September 11th.
I'll move the approval of the minutes that accompanied the agenda.
Okay, all in favor of approving the minutes, raise your hand. Okay, minutes are passed.
Item, Commissioner Heck will now provide an update
Yes.
on the general outreach.
Yes, I think, as most of you may remember, if you can go back that far, last month, we talked about putting in place a more formal general public outreach for the Environmental Commission. I took what we discussed and put it in a slide and sent it to Tanya. Hopefully we can quickly review that, discuss it, and then we need to vote on it or formalize it, or I don't know what the next steps would be, but at least we can review it.
We can't vote on it, it's an informational item, so it's just, you would just report out and then questions and comments, clarifying questions and comments, and then we'd have to bring it back.
So anyway, we talked about it for about 10 minutes last time. I just simply put it in a slide, the kind of what I thought the three main points would be, or the three main elements of an outreach program. The three are town crier articles. So basically we commit as a commission to put a quarterly article together. Ideally, those would mirror our plan that we put together in the next month or two, or take elements out of that plan and educate the community about each of those elements. If we don't have enough items in the plan, we can always pick another topic and write about that as well. I think that would be a rotating member or subcommittee. So one person, one commissioner takes it a quarter and prepares that for the town crier and gets it published. I think that's a relatively low effort, but kind of a nice to have, if we could all agree on that. The other, I think, important item would be, we know there's other community groups that work on environmental items, Greentown being one of them, but also the Rotary and the Chamber of Commerce. And I think it would be great if we could just have annually a representative for each of those groups that attends their meetings at least once a quarter or engages with them at least once a quarter and updates them on what we're working on and gets feedback, understands what they're working on and gets feedback from them on what we're working on, if it aligns with their interest or whether they can help the commission move things forward. Again, I think that's a pretty low effort. We assign one EC member or one EC member volunteers to each group. And we just make sure those meetings are happening on a quarterly basis, and then we can update the commission quarterly on how those community groups, how they think of our activities and what they're doing. And then finally, the other thing I thought that might be good was if we actually had a quarterly or 2 times a year environmental commission newsletter that went out to the community via email or otherwise. But basically just summarizing what we're working on or other topics that we want to cover for the community and send it out. I think that might be a little heavier lift just because it's a formal letter. But again, not super heavy, but I think would require some staff time in terms of reviewing, and I don't know what the mechanics for sending that out are, but certainly would require some city staff time. Those are the top three. Then I think there's some other things we could be doing as a commission as well that we haven't been, or we haven't been doing regularly. Certainly, there is an opportunity for any of us to talk individually or on behalf of the commission if voted upon in front of the city council. I think that might be something we've missed in the last year. Again, there's plenty of topics that we can talk about in front of the council, emphasizing our support that they may not see behind the scenes. They don't have perfect visibility into what we're working on. And so I think that would be something we might want to do in order to highlight certain things with the council. I think we could do better about getting certain items in the city manager updates. That's an email that goes out, every month or a month? Every week? Yeah, so I think we could do better on that. That would just be a dialogue with Tanya on highlighting certain items we want in the city manager email. We do that occasionally, but I think we could do better. And then the final minor thing would be better notification or signage for meetings. I think Carl mentioned we could put something around this area just to make sure people know we have a meeting. Yeah, something minor, limited effort, and might have a payoff. So those are kind of the summary of what we discussed last month. Any questions or comments?
Do we need to go through clarifying questions, public comment? Yeah, so clarifying questions.
How did you get for the community group engagement? You mentioned Rotary, Chamber of Commerce, Greentown. How did you?
Those were all off the top of my head. I think we could certainly make sure we all agree on what the top 3 to 5 are and make sure those are covered. That was an uneducated guess on what those should be.
The quarterly article, were we thinking that we would just elect somebody to go write an article, or is it bring a full piece to the commission, get it approved, and then have it signed off on?
My simple thinking was we're going to have a plan at the so if you look at last year, we had a plan for plastics, bird safety, and lighting ordinance, electrification, and some other topic. At the beginning of the year, we'd say, hey, these are the rough topics. Tom and Xiaopeng, you take bird safety. Let's try to time it with your ordinance. Plastics, whoever was on the plastic ordinance, and you would kind of time it at the beginning of the year, subject to change, things change, but at least line them up at the beginning of the year, sign 1 or 2 people, and then they run with that and be prepared to submit that article. If again, the timing works, if it doesn't, we'll have to have a backup topic that we can slot in. I don't want to bring the whole article to the commission because I think that gets time consuming. But rather, and I don't know if Tanya or staff needs to review the article before it's published. We can work out the details later. But certainly it would be an environmental commission article written by one of us or a couple of us.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's something we need to do, and I can talk to the communications person. But yeah, we can talk about that more.
Okay. Excellent.
Any public comment? Guess we can discuss.
No discussion.
Oh, this is not information items and not discussion items. Okay.
So
What is next for this then?
would we bring this back to the next meeting then? Agendize it and then vote on it and say, this is our plan? This is our outreach plan?
Or you can narrow down, we can also discuss narrowing down some of these items. Let's see. And some of these have multiple, right? Are you thinking of doing all of them?
I was going to do all of them. Again, subject to everybody agreeing to that.
Come back, next week for, or next month for more discussion or just voting.
Okay.
Tom?
Sure.
Discussion items. We have, the CAP implementation roadmap and 2024-2025 work plan. So Tanya has, an update or presentation to share.
Do we have a presentation? So, yes, the CAP implementation roadmap and the 2024 work plan. We're getting a little head start on talking about the 2025 work plan. So I think it's a good time to kind of wrap up the 2024 one and talk, like, finalize the subcommittees. I know there were some questions on the certifications for me, you know, what's happening with that, and start the discussion on the CAP implementation table, so I can kind of go over this. So did you want to maybe go over the work plan first, or do you want me to go over the table?
Let's look at the work plan from 2024, the way you have it. In the packet.
I can set up on the screen.
You need to look at or review the note you have ahead of that with commissioner's role.
The powers and duty. Yeah, I just added that in there as like a reminder of what the council, you know, delegated the powers and duties to be.
To review offline.
Yeah.
Okay.
I can read it out loud if everyone, if that's what everyone wants, but.
Maybe it'd be good to, since we have new commissioner, be good to for you to go over it.
Okay. So I think last year, I can't remember what month, but the council decided new powers and duties, or updated the powers.
Yes.
And this is kind of like a guideline for the commission to follow on what their goals are. So submit an annual report to council providing an update on the implementation of the climate action adaptation plan, as well as updates on any relevant environmental policy or programs. Review and provide recommendations for the implementation of the CAP, including prioritization of CAP action items, make annual recommendations for changes or updates to the plan, annually provide recommendations to the council that affect the natural and built environment to policy, budget, and CIP prioritization, serve as a forum for community input and engagement, and perform other tasks and duties as assigned by the council, such as the dark sky and bird safety. Example of that.
Question on item C. Is it the same, does it go with the annual report, or is there a separate timeline or opportunity to make those, says annually, that assuming that's something that we do once?
She's asking if we will provide that with the annual report. Number C. Yeah, I think that would just be with the annual report.
So this would be in addition, just further to clarify, in addition to anything we feel that needs to go in addition to all the other stuff.
That's how I understand it, yeah.
Clarifying question? Sorry, we jumped into
I
that.
have a clarifying question. I'm not sure if it's relevant to this though. How often do we do like, because obviously the CAP is kind of like a decarbonization roadmap. I'm wondering how often the progress of that decarbonization roadmap is reassessed in terms of numbers. For example, if you electrify 50% of the commercial buildings that the council owns, how often would that kind of assessment be performed?
We don't have a decarbonization roadmap per se, other than like the implementation plan that's in this implementation kind of plan, and there's different appendices, but we do a greenhouse gas inventory every 2 years, or that's the goal of the CAP. And so that is kind of what we look at. There are some metrics, for keeping track of like certain actions that are tied to building decarb. And we're not necessarily taking that data in right now. So it's just mainly through the greenhouse gas inventory.
Clarify, the complete document for the CAP is linked to the website that has a little bit more detail. And I think there's also some guidance on what items to try and have done by when, to.
So this is the 2024 work plan. So just kind of going down the list, Dark Skies might be finishing, might be complete at the end of the year, the beginning of next year. Single-use plastics will hopefully be, this project will hopefully be complete in terms of taking the ordinance to council this year. And then accelerate building electrification. There's going to be an RFP, which will go into 2025. And then the EV fair is still up for discussion on whether we're doing that in 2025. And then we didn't really get to adaptation resilience. So some of these are not fully complete. That's one thing to keep in mind when talking about the 2025 work plan.
So just the third row, I'm assuming it is in progress because we did.
I think this was the original presentation. I don't think this has been updated. This isn't.
Oh, this is what it was.
Yeah, this is inaccurate in terms of the status. Yeah.
Where we are.
Yeah. Yeah, I think 3 out of 4 of them are almost done. Maybe. I mean, we'll see.
So I think that we can think about it. We want to do a similar kind of process and a similar outline of it, so we can think of the newer projects that would come.
Yes, are you trying to tee up those tonight, or how are we thinking about this?
I think we just want to start discussing what the commission wants, what they want their work plan to be, what you want your work plan to be in 2025.
And so, I guess some questions as we go through this. So given that 3 or actually maybe 4 out of 4, if we can get closure on the EV fair.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Maybe we can go through these one by one and just have a quick check-in as to how much longer that talk subcommittee needs to go. And where we think we are with the subcommittee work. Because, we'll need to disband one or more subcommittees to take on a whole lot more, items on the work plan. So should we work through? So Dark Skies, I think Tom, jump in, you worked on that. Yeah, I think, we'll have the update.
And we'll have the update. I think
We're
we,
just trying to figure out how much more,
I think the subcommittee will be done, pretty quickly after tonight, we hope. I think we have to do some outreach and then hopefully attend the council meeting when it's put up, but that'll be it.
Single-use plastics, I think.
The single-use plastics was reviewed at the last meeting. Now it's in staff hands for tweaking based on the comments. So I think at the last meeting, we talked about that committee is disbanded, or that subcommittee is disbanded. But as Tanya said, it's gonna go in front of the council when they can get it on the agenda in the next couple of months.
Yeah, and I mean, the council can choose to say like they want to do more outreach or more post-adoption outreach, like, and so there could be more tasks involved with that. We don't know, but as it was created for, it is disband for helping with the creation of the ordinance. Yeah,
And do we have a date for when that is going to the council yet?
I think we're aiming for 10/22.
Okay, so fairly soon.
There's no meeting to 10/22. There's 2 meetings left in the year. There's the second meeting, 10/20, I'm sorry, the second month. I'm sorry.
Okay, and then I guess I'm the only one from the electrification subcommittee, on the commission. So I think we did the initial work, and our action item from last time was to go review, the August 10th meeting, of council, where they reviewed and maybe we'll talk about it in the update, but I think maybe there may be just a little bit more work to do based on direction from the council as I read it from that meeting. So we'll have to figure out, if we need someone else to join that subcommittee.
I think we need clarification, when we get to electrification, what the next steps are there. It's not clear whether there's more steps on that or whether the action item was work on the cap and
Yeah, there were a couple specific things that I caught.
Okay, excellent.
So one's disbanded, the other we think, and is there an official process to disband?
Well, I think it just,
Okay,
Subcommittee was Laura and Bruno, so it's sort of disbanded. So you can create a new subcommittee for that
okay,
when you know the scope.
okay, yeah. And then the dark skies we're expecting to be done today. Okay. And then the EV fair, we'll talk about it when we do the updates.
Commissioner, Vice Chair Van Rees, can give an update during the commissioners' reports.
So what do you think we should be doing next? Should we be discussing, should we be scrolling through the cap items as you listed them? Or should we be discussing what we think, or should we be going around the room and everyone have to
yes,
say?
how do you want to handle the process, I think, is the question, because last year, because they have the funky nature of the change in the commissions, Bruno had come up with a plan like in May, based on kind of, he and my review of the cap, and we kind of prioritized. And then 4 months later, 5 months later, when we got this plan finalized, we kind of winnowed it down to 3 or 4 items, again, based on our review of the cap. Kind of what was driving it. That's how we ended up with these 4. And so I think that's a good process, but I think it's hard to come up with ideas with everybody, but you'll need to winnow them down based on what you hear, right?
So did you have something in mind?
Table,
Yeah.
real quick, and then I think
And
we
can I have
have some homework to do.
one other question? So in discussions after last week and the electrification meeting, the council, I'm kind of under the impression we can work in groups of 2 without an official subcommittee designation. As long as that group of two does not discuss anything that they discuss until they come to the commission meeting. So I think that might provide us a little more flexibility to get some things done, if that's the case.
I'm just processing what you're saying. So
Yeah, I might not have said it clearly.
So that I
Yeah,
can.
I'm under the impression that, like say there's an interesting topic in the CAP, that two people are interested in, they can go ahead and take that, make a study it, make a recommendation about it, without officially forming a subcommittee, so they can still work on other official subcommittees. But that those two commission members could only talk to each other about the item, could only work with each other about that, and then could only update the larger group at the commission. So their conversations would have to be between those two and then at a monthly commission meeting. So in other words, that would open up.
I seem to recall when the guidelines came out, and maybe when we need to redistribute them to everyone, that we were able to work on certain tasks that we agreed on without forming a subcommittee, specific limited tasks. And maybe clarify that.
Yeah, so the one thing that's, so when the subcommittees form is that can somewhat rely or kind of in tandem work with staff. If there's kind of like the ad hoc, kind of like working group or working person, because sometimes one person's going to be super interested in something that, I mean, the CAP's very robust. There's stuff that's, definitely someone's forte and other stuff for others. But so if it's kind of like that ad hoc basis, 0 staff time would be allowed or awarded. That's really kind of the real fundamental, is if it's a true subcommittee that's formed, agreed upon by the entire commission, and it's also obviously in the work plan, then that's also kind of setting the priorities for what staff is going to help assist on. It's just, as long as we have the full mutual understanding, explicitly, is that if it's not on the work plan and not essentially a formed subcommittee, staff will not provide any support to it until it becomes essentially moving up the ladder, so to speak. Yes, you could say.
Yeah.
So a minority of the commission can collaborate on a task, and report out to the commission, so long as, we're not drawing on staff support.
Yeah, and that makes sense.
In addition to ad hoc.
In addition to the subcommittees. But so say the work plan is put together. You couldn't have it in, like, if there's 3 items, and so you have 3 subcommittees and everybody's taken up, and you have a 4th item, you couldn't have 2 people working on that is not an official subcommittee. And I'm not quite familiar with the designation, but that would still be in the work plan and still eligible for staff help. But just being worked on by 2 people who might be on another subcommittee. So I guess I might be confusing things, but.
So,
Are
and
you sure?
we, it says in the rules, commissioners can only serve on one subcommittee at a time.
But does 2 make it a subcommittee? I guess I don't know what makes it a subcommittee.
But again, if we can pull out the exact wording, because I recall there being something specific about the ability to work on tasks or
I guess
collaborate on tasks.
Yeah, and the reason I'm not trying to confuse everything, I'm just trying to figure out if there's some more flexibility in terms of commission resource that can work on a couple things at once instead of just being relegated to one item, which is kind of confining. And I don't know do you happen to know, Mayor Weinberg, if that's the case or off the top of your head, if
Any commissioner can talk to another commissioner of a substantive issue. But you cannot then talk to other commissioners about it substantive. You become a subcommittee when the entire commission deems it to be a subcommittee, and you can have a subcommittee of 2. At which point, like Nick said, then you get a little bit more staff report. But of course, any commissioner at any time can go to staff just with basic questions and try to get basic answers. Is that what you're asking?
I guess so.
Yeah, that's fine.
Maybe I'm pushing the boundaries too much and,
We should be appointed ad hoc subcommittee consisting of less than a majority. But commissioners cannot be on multiple subcommittees.
One, I found the note from Melissa Thurman, from March 1. It talks about subcommittees, as you say, then it says, finally, commissioners are also able to work on items of interest in pairs for topics that may not require the formal committee, but may benefit from a deeper dive.
So the way members of council do it is I pick up the phone and say, hey, Pete, I want to talk to you about the dark skies ordinance. Are you already Brown Acted with someone? And if you're not, are you willing to Brown Act with me? And sometimes the answer is, I'm talking to someone else, or I don't want to Brown Act with anyone yet, in which case we don't get into it. Now, if you already have an existing subcommittee of 3, someone who is not on that subcommittee should not contact one of those people and say, let's have a substantive talk, because that now essentially you've got 4 people talking about it outside of the notice meeting. So that you can't do. But otherwise, if it's just 2 people and it's not involving anyone who's on a subcommittee about an issue, pick up the phone, send an email and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this. Are you talking about with anyone else already? And if not, or you want to talk about it with me? And then you come back to a meeting and say, hey, we have this, 2 of us talk, we've got a great idea. What do you think about it?
That makes sense. So I guess the guideline is to make sure that we are aware that, we're Brown acting, if that's the word. And then we can have that discussion if we believe that, we're clear.
The real big fundamental is just knowing who you're talking to and then what they're specifically already designated or kind of committed to, so to speak, so that you're not kind of crossing the hairs of creating like a daisy chain, essentially, of.
but say, just for a hard example, imagine next year we have bird safety is ongoing, and so Xiaopeng and I are the subcommittee, but we're also both interested in one element of building electrification in the cap. We could, as long as nobody else is working on that, and we're not talking to anybody else about it, I'm not talking to Carl or Rashina about it, we could talk to each other about it and come up with a study and a suggested action and submit it to the commission at some point for talk about it in front of the commission, right?
Yeah, as long as there's gonna be no staff time, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, and
That is always going back to that is keeping, to be able to have the work plan reflective of what staff has been authorized or kind of greenlit to work on. And
yeah. But the outcome of that might be, Tom and Xiaopeng say, this is something that should be prioritized. Here's the suggested actions. We'd like to get staff time, and then there's a negotiation of how, if we can get that or not, right? You might say, yeah, you can get staff time, but then we have to sacrifice this, and everybody might say that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's gonna have to be a case by case basis, because I mean, depending on how specific or finite the work plan is and what council's kind of bought off on, I mean, electrification, for example, is kind of a little bit interchangeable and kind of gray, so to speak, because there's so many different facets of it that you could kind of say, okay, well, we've been doing this, we've hit a roadblock on that, but hey, me and Xiaopeng have been working on this rebate program, and it's not at a final stage, but we did, a month worth of background data. Here's like a write-up of what we actually found. So then Tanya doesn't have to kind of go down the rabbit hole of doing all that background data and research. So I think it's essentially, if you guys are doing all the research and kind of getting it collectively where you guys have a thought to kind of more expeditiously bring it before staff and the commission, that's fine.
Okay.
Should we walk through the actions? Yeah. And maybe we can go into the detail of each one, just the broader category.
Yeah, so, essentially just for the kind of outline of this is you have the action number, you have what the action is.
I have that, yeah. I think we all have copies, but just in case someone comes online and wants to follow.
Yeah, and you've all seen this before. It's, or you've seen the appendices. I kind of just took, there's a few different appendices, so I just took them and rearranged it. So you have the action, and then you have the description of the action, and then I color coded it to fall within the focus area. So the first one is transportation, second is energy and resource conservation, and so on and so forth. The one that you have has the timeline as well as the implementation status notes on there. And then, yes, so, and then there's the timeline for kind of, there's a section in the CAP that has like a timeline. So I just took those out of there. And then there's estimated cost. Just keep in mind with the estimated cost, this was done almost 3 years ago now. So take that with a grain of salt. It's just kind of giving an idea. And then the GHG impact, and then the implementation status, kind of some notes of like what's going on in the city related to these actions. One thing I did want to know is that I think we've been taking a like bottom-up approach to implementation. So we've been doing like action by action versus like a top-down approach, where we're kind of looking at the high-level targets, which would be like the strategies or just the percentage of reduction or like vehicle miles traveled reduced. So I think that's important to keep in mind when we're creating the 2025 work plan. But also, you know, what is it that, you know, we really want to focus on and what's going to make the highest impact, which, you know, the GHG reductions impact, you can tell like whatever has a higher number. So like, take 2.1B, it has over 10,000 GHG reduction impact. And that is obviously the REACH codes, which are a good example because up on pause. But there's different ways of looking at that to really look at this implementation strategy and how we want to do it to narrow it down. So that's why I kind of focus on those in this table. Are there any questions on like the table or the appendices in the CAP?
I have one. How are these GHG impacts assessed?
Yeah, those were assessed by the consultant to help create the CAP, and they use like science-based kind of targets and math, a lot of calculations and math to get those emission factors. They're usually based off of like an actual number, like how many miles traveled like in a vehicle, and then they get all the data and then they create an emissions factor for it.
Somewhere in the CAP, there'll be the model that was used to determine some of these numbers. The names that on top of my head.
My thought was a little bit more the actual, you know, because it's kind of initiative by initiative, so we've kind of, when I looked at this, I thought that would be the reduction you would get by spending a certain dollar. So I'm wondering what assumptions have been taken on the reduction for a given scope? Because I get the, like, miles traveled emissions factor gives you your total emissions. Then if you take an action, how much is that going to reduce by? That's kind of
That's what
what's
the
in the
number is,
table.
yeah, that's the reduction.
That's the column on the table.
Got it. And so the assumptions that went into that was done by a consultant?
Yeah.
Okay, and they also estimated the spend as well?
Yes. And Rashida, you were involved with that, or?
Yeah.
Sorry, Chair Ryan. Yeah, if you want to talk more about that, feel free to give us some background, but.
There was a model that was used, and that information was part of the cap.
I have a few comments after thinking about this, and you want to dive in and throw out some things to chew on. Is that the intent at this point, or do you want to go through more of the detail? I'm not sure plowing through each one of the action items. is-
Yeah, that's for like the commission to review as homework and bring back.
Yeah, I think it'd be tough to review all of it today, unless, and maybe the one thing we can do today is if somebody has, you know, something they really want to share and prioritize, we can go around the table and discuss that, so that we have notes when we go to review the plan in detail. And then we should potentially, I don't know how we do this, we should maybe come back at the next meeting with proposals. And based on what people say, maybe, the vice chair, actually not myself, and Tanya, we could narrow down what we think, and then we'll have the commission review it.
Yeah, I think that's how we did it last year. We probably came to the commission once or twice with the overall plan and voted this on their feedback.
And then Bruno had a whole presentation. I think he outlined all of this too, so.
So maybe if we just break it into the color codes, so if we just first talk about transportation and just walk through quickly if anybody has any thoughts.
Commissioner Vivian, did you? have a couple
Yeah,
thoughts?
so, yeah, I didn't mean to interrupt you, that's what,
No, I
yeah.
think you would, if you want to do it that way. I was asking how you wanted to approach it.
Yeah.
I went through and looked at it generally, and I have sort of four concepts that I think I throw out for
Yeah.
consideration about how to build a work plan for next year. So, okay,
Let's do it.
in no particular order. I think the first thing, and there's two things that I took away from the meeting with the council had 2 weeks ago, maybe it was not last meeting, the meeting before. One is, I think they have a priority of what's the status on the cap, and so I think that should be one item that whether or not this commission needs to help staff in that, in the analysis of where we stand in the progress on the cap, but that's a work item, and you know, it's a combination of staff, maybe with assistance from some of the commissioners. So that's the status where we are on that. The second item that was, I think, clear direction from council was that they wanted, how can we incentivize 100% electric buildings? And that was a question that they put forward, and I think that they asked during that meeting to come up with some suggestions on that. So certainly it's going to be a staff work plan item. The question is to what extent does the commission help on that?
Is that new buildings?
No, incentivize, it was incentivize 100% electric buildings. It was broad in the sense of in remodels, in new construction, and in repairs, if you will. And there's a whole host of things that you can do in that. But those are the two items that I took away right away from the council. The third one I'll throw out is I believe the new building standards construction comes out, it takes effect 1/1/26. And so I think we should have a subcommittee or whatever to look at, because my understanding is they release the new building code, maybe at the end of the first quarter or before mid-year, so you know what the new code's gonna be and you can work on, can you reach or what can you do to go beyond that with either green building standards or reach codes. And so I think that one of the things that, again, that this commission could work on with staff is to develop what do you want to present to council for reach codes for when the new building standards are adopted. Do they adopt something in addition to that? And my fourth one, in looking at this, a lot of the transportation and building issues and things like that are either they're significantly beyond the scope of the Environmental Commission. They add complete streets, they add lots of other things that the staff and the Public Works Department are involved in. So I was trying to narrow it down. Well, what are the types of things that are more in our corral? Certainly we'd assist on those other things whenever called to, but what's more in our control, what we have more direct influence on. And my thought on this is pretty broad, but it starts with an urban forest plan. What's our tree cover like? How can we improve that? How can we, what types of things can we do or suggest that could go beyond that? Because I view that if we increase our tree canopy, we do a lot of things when we do that. If it includes things like on El Monte Avenue, they put in some islands with a couple of trees in there to help slow traffic. Well, that does a lot of things. It adds greenery, it adds your tree cover, it slows down traffic, it increases infiltration from rainwater, it reduces the amount of pavement that you have to repair and replace year after year. So things that we can do to increase the treescape or the vegetation coverage, if you will, in the city. And it may start as an urban forest plan, but a little bit beyond that, and maybe it includes such things like, an ordinance that you can't put in the impermeable driveway. You can't AC or replace the AC on the street side of your property line for your parking. It has to be permeable. Things like that increase the water infiltration, increase greenery, reduce the heat island effect. So I view that that's something that we can have, we can put in ideas that create multiple benefits for what it is. So I'll call it an urban forest plan plus, looking at those types of things. What can you do within it? So those are the four takeaways that I had, and then I had one that is some of these items that really are heavy lift for the city alone, but are there things that, and this falls to Tanya in your time, that you could get assistance with other cities or cooperation with cities to advance issues that then become more regional? And a couple examples could be like the thing for on your utility bill, there's a city tax. It's the same for gas and electricity, and it may even be a state initiative that puts those, that they have to be the same. But is there a push that we as a city can get regional activity to say, now, we really want to incentivize electricity, so let's make it possible that you can increase those city taxes on gas. So things like that are more regional efforts that may be done through this, I don't know, League of Cities or whatever. But there's several items on here that one city can't do, but we may be able to influence to get a little bit more momentum on multiple cities and a regional approach to it. Those are my takeaways from this, and I get off my soapbox.
Maybe we can go around the room now. I guess we can just cover whatever category. Should we start with Tom? Any thoughts?
I think my thoughts were, I kind of look at it like where can we get the most bang for, well, most bang, I won't say bang for the buck because some of it's expensive. But clearly I started focusing on electrification, and obviously we are halted on reach codes a bit, but I just keep thinking there's gotta be, I know other cities are coming up with alternatives to reach codes to eliminate gas. And I know it's complicated and the council may not support it right off the bat, or staff may not support it right off the bat, but I think it's something we should look at seriously and actually propose, because that's where we're gonna get a lot of greenhouse gas emission reduction that we haven't. And it's kind of right now just out there because we're scared to touch it, but I still think it's kind of our job to come up with suggestions on how we might circumvent those or look at other cities, what other cities are doing. And so it might be hitting our head against a wall when we do that, but I still think it's worth looking at and coming up with some suggestions for staff and council.
Certainly, I see electrification as a major part. In terms of where I think it's not being touched enough is the fourth point that Don was making. And the way I'm doing it is that we need to be able to make recommendations on restoring native ecosystems. And in many cases, that would involve taking away pavement. And that does address, actions that we have in here. And it touches 5 and 6, and then, argue into some of the other ones as well. I just think the environmental benefits are just too great to ignore. Pavement is just taking over everywhere, and urban Halifax is getting out of control. So, just to talk about one specific in here, in 5.2C, it's referred to as pilot carbon farming opportunities, but it talks about Miyawaki forests. I visited Berkeley's Miyawaki forests a couple weeks ago, and the idea of that initiative is a fast way of restoring ecosystems so that they are self-sustaining. It doesn't really fit with the action that we put it under, but it is certainly something related to native sort of ecosystems that I think is viable. So essentially, I'm advocating for 5.2B expand parks of natural wooded spaces and coming up with recommendations how to do that. I think a big part of that is taking away pavement as well, which would be technically 6.1C, not to the way it's written, but the reducing impermeable surface areas. I see those as tied together very closely.
And on that, I know the CSMP, the Complete Streets Master Plan, talks about creating more pedestrian path. I don't know if that's like trail or just pavements, but I could see that clashing there. And that's also in the cap. So we need to get clear.
Paths don't have to be impermeable.
Yeah. Make sure everyone's on the same page for that. So that's a good point.
I think we should get a biggest bang for the box is focusing electrification. I think for those things the subcommittee has proposed, we need to find a way to really educate and encourage our residents. I think before, we can formally put the all electrification, into mandatory before that. I think there are many things. And I think some of the things suggested in the council meeting, one of the ways to lower the development cost. That's another, way to. And also people also need to be aware that, some of this gas appliances will not be available. So especially for the new builds or someone is looking for replace, it's a better investment for themselves, not only that way, but also does very good things for the environment as a whole. So, yeah, I think, we talk about all this, electric HVAC, water heaters, but also the increase in energy efficiency, the insulation of the house, the lighting, windows, yeah, all that stuff. I think those are the areas we can do more education outreach, plus other ways we can incentivize people.
So I'll go next, and then maybe we'll let you give us the fresh perspective. So when we looked at the cap, transportation was the biggest impact. I forget what percentage it was. So I think, even though electrification is something that, we have more control over, and there are specific things in addition to that, I think we should continue to look at the transportation, actions that are listed here. A lot towards, and, a lot of these, as Don said, are gonna require, multi-layered, work with the county, work with other, get public transportation and all that stuff. But we should focus on that and see what we can get done by ourselves and what we need to start collaborations with to get, bigger impact. I had a question related to that. Even though we rolled back the REACH codes, a portion of the REACH codes was EV infrastructure. Is that still in place?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good thing, and we need to continue incentivizing EVs with the EV fair, promoting that end as well. So, and I agree with everything that was said on the electrification. I do believe what Xiaoping you said about reducing is also important. Even if we swap out everything to electricity at some point, even that electricity is costing something. So work on that, reducing both the electricity, water stuff, and urban forest and ecosystems is something I usually in favor of. So I'd like for us to do something concrete about that. I know we did the tree protection ordinance last year. I think we should work on what could be the next step.
Yeah, benefit of going last is I can say everyone's right. When I looked at the cap originally, I was genuinely surprised at how big transportation was. So I'm with you. That's where you're going to get, and obviously it's hard to control because transportation is mostly done by residents or visitors to Los Altos. So I think that has to be a focus. And then the second one that I really thought about was electrification. A couple of interesting things I learned recently. Well, actually, one thing that happened was we moved into we rent our house in Los Altos, and we moved into a new place. And so when we moved in, we noticed that one of the rooms in the building, in the house, had really bad heating or air conditioning. And so we got a HVAC technician to come over that the landlord paid for. And then I asked him, out of interest, how often do you recommend a heat pump? He's like, well, not very often. And he rationalized it from the perspective of, gas gives you a lot of flexibility, and he mentioned some corner cases. He really went into the technical details. So it was really a technical recommendation based on optimizing comfort. And so it got me to think a little bit about how people make decisions around their homes. And personally think that a lot of people will make decisions on the basis of what guys like that are telling them. And so one thing that I just wanted to suggest, in case it hasn't already been thought of, is how could we get more local HVAC technicians to extol the benefits of electrification when they're talking to their clients. Another thing I learned was, and this could not be true, but it was on their website, the Packard Foundation, who is based in Los Altos, they have their headquarters there, has apparently the largest net zero building in California. And so I thought about maybe reaching out to them. One thing we could do is reach out to them and get them to kind of do a case study. They might already have one on how they did that and what the benefits were, what the trade-offs were, as a way of kind of trying to convince more commercial building owners and builders to go down that path of really when you're investing in a building, making sure it's net zero, because that's the cheapest time to create a net zero building. So those are the things I thought about.
Those are all really great. I did want to let you know that SVCE, they have a program where they're trying to train contractors, and we've sent out like an email to all of the contractors that we work with in the city about like that program. So it's one thing we're trying to tackle with contractors, and it goes to all of them, like HVAC, and so. But yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, I think we have a decent set of recommendations that people feel strongly about. I think next steps, and I think I would encourage everyone to keep thinking if something comes up. Tanya, if you're open to this, have people send you recommendations, and then maybe we can start the process of whittling down and prioritizing items to commission next month.
And I also kind of wanted to give an example of what another city is doing, the city of Albany, and they're comparable to us, being like the same population and not really having any big, commercial and stuff like that. They're working on a pilot project where they're trying to electrify all buildings in one city block. So it's kind of like a big, bold move that's incentive, and it's opt-in kind of thing. So they want to officially decommission the gas lines on that block. And that's kind of like a big wow project that could get a lot of community like eyes on it. That's an example of thinking outside the box and doing something different than the REACH codes.
I just want to kind of quickly add just a couple of things. So I had Tanya on the printed sheet that is here. Is the implementation status. I don't know if when I stepped out to use the restroom, I don't think that was covered, but those are not things that are in the cap. Those are actually just kind of like some quick notes that I provided Tanya to be able to kind of put here, just to be able to at least allow the commission to know that there are certain things that either can't 100% happen with those action items from the cap, because there's essentially comprehensive general plan via the governance document needs to occur, or there are certain things that I just think when we've kind of talked about it internally, even executive staff, is just that we need to be better at providing the narrative of the things that are going on that really aren't. Obviously, there's 16 new EV chargers here at the community center. I bet you not many people, including even commissioners, don't even know about it. But they're right outside now, and that just happened within the last 2 weeks. So that was just kind of just an example of just there's certain things that are actual components of some of these action items that are things that some of them are, super small that we probably wouldn't tell you in real time until after it happens, like simple little things like more bike racks in downtown. Just because, how much talking can we do until we just get them down there? But there is certain other things that are kind of going across disciplines as well, of what's going on, even beyond the things like what Tanya mentioned, which is obviously there's a lot of stuff always going on with, the CSC, they have their own kind of work plan and their own document that they're trying to implement, which we need to kind of eventually, whether they're on it's quarterly or, biannually, kind of update our kind of implementation progress, because they're implementing things that are not really easy, but have relationships to what we're doing with the CAP. Just building really quickly, since we're kind of just talking about it, and since you guys kind of someone talked about some of the implementations of things that we have done, and just to orient yourselves for when you're looking at this independently over the next month. Since I mentioned the 16 chargers that are just on that side of the community center, the police department, we actually just got, it was last week, the portable electric charging station, which is actually enough electric power to be able to charge the PD vehicles that we do have that are electric fleet. This year we are earmarked to receive 2 additional police department electric vehicles, Chevy Blazers. So again, kind of talking about electrifying transportation, and transportation being the biggest impact, us taking, combustible fleet off of, our roadways is actually, it's wildly, a big, implementation. And then something that we're not really kind of hallmarking yet, but we are likely to receive a $500,000 grant to electrify for additional EV deployment in downtown Los Altos. A lot of that's going to be to the underground, electrification work that has to happen, not the actual chargers. But that would be wildly successful and actually a huge grant for us to receive. If we don't get it, we are hoping to anticipate to be able to fund it another way as well. I think that's kind of a really big kind of win for the community, because I think we all know, kind of going backwards, is we all remember 15 years ago, everyone was worried about getting an EV because they're like, well, how long is it going to run? How long is it going to run? And I think now it's, well, is there going to be a charger when I get there to charge? So I think it's kind of interesting also too, just since we have a new commissioner, and if the other commissioner that's new that watches this is, we do have, it's kind of interesting, bookends almost of 2 Tesla supercharging stations, essentially. One, ironically, directly behind a gas station. And then the other one, a lot of people haven't really noticed, because I don't believe those ones are turned on yet either, but they are installed, is the one that's right closest catty corner to the bagel shop. Is on the Mountain View side of the El Monte and ECR. I'm sorry? Those ones are? Okay, that's good.
There were 9 Teslas charging.
Yeah, good. But so I just think that's kind of, really important, especially when we talk about the migration from, gas engine vehicles to electrification of our own fleet and everything, is we have to have that infrastructure. And I think it is good that we're kind of starting to finally get some bigger deployments rather than, 2 or 3 here and there to make a big deal. So those are kind of good things, but just to kind of let you know those, as well as just,
So yeah, I think we need to, it'd be good if we could do it more formally, where we look at, all the things that, different groups within the city are doing, and then tag them against the actions. Because, everything doesn't have to come from the, from the environmental commission or the city, or, directly from staff, but whoever it is getting done, we should, put it down there and see how we can do more.
and that's part of kind of the council's overall intent with kind of looking at the CAP. It's not really to peel back layers, so to speak. It's really to kind of be like, well, wait, the city staff is working on stuff, CSC, the EC, there's kind of 3 big groups kind of working on things, and everyone can't obviously talk every single day, but, a quarterly report saying, hey, we actually got that grant. Cool. Now we're not doing anything. Next quarter, hopefully we have a deployment, or, so on and so forth. So, kind of some good things kind of in the works.
Yeah. And then I guess the thing that we touched on briefly, the greenhouse gas inventory, we pushed it out, even though, we thought we would be doing it 2 years because of COVID and getting, irregular data. So what is I'm assuming we can't get it done before, we present the council looked at the CAP When is that expected to be? Around January sometime?
When the council looks at this document.
The cap, well, yeah, so at the September 9th meeting, the mayor proposed that we should put that on the agenda for the council.
You're talking about the greenhouse gas inventory is what you're.
Yeah, so yeah, as
Two separate questions.
two separate questions. When is that gonna be done? And then the second question is,
Yeah.
could we get the inventory before then? Probably not, or could we?
No, I think we can. I think, right now the consultant is just QAQCing the work we've done on the on the GHG inventory, so we should have that actually pretty soon.
Okay,
Yeah,
that's,
we
that's
should
really
bring it
good.
back in November, just to report out as an informational item, if it's ready, yeah.
Okay, okay, good. So that then we'll have, data, people behind some of this and tell us where we are. Sounds good. Should we move on to, is there anything else for this suggestion? For this,
And the next step is probably, at the next meeting, there'll be sort of a rough outline that we can talk more detail. So if we had some ideas, can we send them to Tanya
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
we have so our outline is a little bit more refined than, you know,
yes.
than
So,
starting
yeah,
where we
so-
just ended tonight.
Yeah, so no, what I'm hoping is that everyone who has, has ideas in the next week or two, send those into Tanya, and then hoping that Carl, I, and Tanya can get together and pull those together and then see if we can come up with a straw man that we can all discuss.
Yeah, good.
Okay.
So, does staff present or do Tanya and I present, or, Shelfang and I present?
You guys can go ahead. I mean, it's obviously the draft kind of from what we kind of gone back and clarify or make notes to correct.
Okay, so, I'll start then. So, as you know, we've been working on dark sky for almost a year now, or, I'm gonna call it a lighting ordinance inspired by dark sky, suggestions, and a bird safety ordinance as well. And so, for history, we had prepared our recommendations. We passed it over to staff. Staff came back with their ordinance recommendations, and we had some great dialogue over the last few weeks. Result is what's in your packet. Hopefully you all got a chance to read that. What I can say, and Xiaoping, make sure I'm speaking correctly on your behalf. If you have any difference of opinion, make sure you state it. So I think in general, the ordinance is prepared to meet what we recommended, give or take. Probably not quite as restrictive as we wanted, but certainly in the right direction and certainly covering most of the items we wanted to cover, with a few exceptions, and I'll make sure those are clear, and Nick knows those exceptions, and they were intentional from the staff side. So on bird safety, the applicability of the ordinance, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, is only for buildings within 300 feet of an open space. And I'm not sure what qualifies as an open space. Do you have a definition in mind?
So our open space is defined by our land use adopted map. So it's essentially any of like the public, like our parks. There is actual also open space area, which is not parks, but it is zoned as such. Woods Lane is that, so kind of what is near Arboretum. You know, obviously a lot of the areas that are near the country club, which is you know, immediately adjacent to us in what's called the sphere of influence. So there's a lot of areas throughout. There's also areas that are all either a part of or immediately adjacent to all of the schools throughout town. So there is actually a lot more than people think because of all of those different land uses.
So that is one key thing to keep in mind as you're considering this. And then, and the dialogue there was, of course, we wanted it to cover all the buildings in the city, but when you look at our neighboring cities, and I'm not 100% sure on this, but when I did a review and when Nick's done a review, most of the neighboring cities really do cover buildings near water, bird habitats, so water, open spaces, and they do exempt sometimes downtowns and other areas if they're not next to an open space. So that applicability, it's not what we wanted, but it's also not unusual, is what I would say. So far, that may change when Palo Alto's about to implement a bird safety ordinance, and I don't know what they're going to cover, but theirs may be broader in terms of its area that it covers. So that's, otherwise the bird safety is in line with the exception of applicability, the areas it covers. On the lighting ordinance inspired by dark skies, it's in line with what we wanted. And Nick has carved out 4 specific things that aren't covered because they are covered in other ordinances. And then Nick, again, correct me if I'm not speaking accurately. Specifically, signs. Signs are covered under a different ordinance, so can't, or I guess it's not efficient to cover it under this ordinance. Illuminated signs. Ideally, you would cover those, but those won't be covered on this ordinance, although I think we can probably put a statement that those are intended to be covered moving forward, which they can be. It does not cover streetlights, and we've talked about that. There's budgetary issues, there's control issues around the streetlights in Los Altos, so those are not covered. City lighting is not covered. I think mostly because of budgetary issues, it's hard to put an ordinance in place when you don't have a line of sight on what it would cost to comply. Is that right, Nick, effectively? And then finally, it doesn't cover parks and sports facilities covered by the city, owned by the city, like tennis courts and those type of things, because those are, again, covered by other ordinances, if I'm not mistaken. And so I think that it covers most things except for those 4 carve-outs, but ideally we would have a statement to the council that those 4 areas, with the exception of maybe city lighting, I don't know how you cover that, would be covered. The intent is to cover those subject to budgetary approval, I guess. That makes sense, Xiaopeng? Is that? So that is, if you've read it and you compare it to the first couple presentations we had to the commission, that is in a nutshell the result of what we have. Any questions or comments?
So can we just dive into a discussion, or do we need to do that?
We don't take public comment on the. Oh, the agenda one.
Okay. Yeah, so this discussion.
I think there was some mention that parking lot lights don't have to comply. Is that to do with the city, or is there another reason for that?
If it is, so actually that's a good point. I think, Nick, if that is city lighting, that is why it's not covered.
Yeah, but otherwise.
Otherwise, it would be covered.
Okay.
If it's a private building with a parking lot, it would be covered.
Yes.
Okay. Actually, so to also cover that, I could pull it up or have Tanya pull it up, but when we amended our parking regulations at the beginning of this year, which didn't come to this commission because we were updating it comprehensively with the planning commission as a part of the housing element, is we specifically said that everything would be fully shielded downward and away from other adjacent properties. so that it is kind of already covered in that ordinance.
I saw it mentioned too that commercial uses, they would have to shut their lights at midnight versus others were 11 p.m. What's the justification for that difference?
I think it was midnight or closure, so the latest is midnight.
Okay,
So if they close earlier, it's supposed to be extinguished.
okay. I guess I'm just curious, why not do 11 to make it more in line with residential use?
Predominantly is because if they're still open, we would kind of look at it more as a safety component, is that it should be still having illumination while there's non-residential essentially occupancy happening.
And then, I think there was a gap of 5 years and 10 years for implementation. Maybe we discussed it before, but just to reiterate why the difference between, why 5, 10, why not a closer implementation window?
I think we did talk about that earlier, and that's a good question. But I think that is, I think how most of them are written, currently. And we wanted to give residences enough time, if they've just bought a lighting, setup, that they have time to remedy it and make it compliant.
I have a couple questions on the bird safety design standards. On the applicability, I heard what Tom said. I'm struggling with the wording there, because if this is only to apply to buildings located with 300 feet of an open space, if that's what I heard, it appears as though in that applicability paragraph that it applies to single family, it applies to A, B, and C.
I think it would if it's within 300 feet.
Yeah, but I am not sure the wording is clear.
Oh, is it, oh, is that what it is? It's not
Yeah,
A, B, and C, but it's,
It has to be A, B, and C, and so C is the defining.
if it's not C, then A and B don't apply.
That's exactly right.
but I think
Yeah.
the wording should probably be a little bit more clear,
I read it
because
the
I
same way.
read it and it looked like it meets A, so that I'm fine. Or it meets B and I'm fine. It's C.
When you're-
it
when you're-
says something like
by the way, when
it
you're
has to
fine-
meet all of the above.
When you're fine, are you saying you're subject to the rules?
No, it's applicable to the rules, yes.
Yeah, that is applicable. So when you say it's fine, so if you hit A,
If you're a single family residence, then it applies to you. That's the way I would read the way the
well,
statement is made.
I think the catch is there's an and at the end of every line.
Yeah, but I think to be clear, you should say, shall meet all of the following.
Fair enough.
Because I didn't read that, when I read that, I didn't take away.
I also didn't catch it at first, until Nick explained it, yeah.
That was my only comment on that. I don't, maybe some other people want to comment on that. I have a couple of questions on the lighting that I'll hold.
I mean, I read it, that all would need to apply, which made me think it was quite limited in scope. I agree with you, the wording could be clearer.
Is there a map that tells us where those areas are, so everybody knows?
So we haven't, because we obviously haven't kind of solidified this up until this meeting, so we would be able to do something once we kind of move forward with this, if this is really what the commission is okay with. Because we do have, like I said, our land use map already that's adopted, and so we would just be able to create a 300-foot buffer around those land uses, and have that map available for a part of this when we go for implementation.
So that means, we kind of have to agree to all of this. If we have a problem with it, we can put that forward.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't, you guys correct me, I think we ask questions and then we go with opinions and comments. And if you have a hard thing, I won't vote yes on this unless we change that, then you should say that.
Questions?
Did somebody have something else on lighting then?
Yeah, I think Don just said that.
I had a few other comments on lighting, and I submitted to Tanya and Nick some comments that I think are more editorial, and I won't go through all of that. But the one I did do, because again, I heard what you said about it doesn't, the intent is not to include street lighting, and I can understand that. But when I read the draft ordinance, I guess it's E has 7 different types of facilities, and 6 reads government facility. And the word facilities is not defined. And what in here, and like the 5 says public school facilities, which include athletic fields and parking lot lights, okay? But then you go to government facilities owned by the city of Los Altos or a public utility. Now, facility, if I'm putting a very broad interpretation of that, would include a street lighting, a utility box on the side of a street, or it could include a building or something else. And so when I first read that, I said, well, why, and looking at 5, why doesn't it say which include or which does not include street lighting? And so I think, again, there's a need for some clarity there. And I can understand if street lighting is excluded, but let's make it clear. So I think we either have to define, somehow you have to define what a government facility is. If it's just a building, then it's just a building.
Yeah, so government facilities, when we apply it, it's to anything essentially that like it says, owned by the city. So it's not just government buildings. Roadways are considered a facility. Lighting infrastructure is considered a facility. So the city of Los Altos, and this is actually something we did talk about when we kind of originally talked about it in either March or April, is that we would not include specific requirements because all government agencies are exempt from their own local regulations. However, that's why we would normally want it to be a recommendation to the council for essentially them to adopt a policy, which is usually what they deviate to in order to be able to make their, budget allocations or, approve work plans, so on and so forth, or like what their priorities are. So that's where we kind of landed when I started moving forward with this after the subcommittee kind of gave me their stuff this summer. And then once we had that kind of conversation with the entire commission back in spring. So it was intentional to be that way. Also, the difference is that if we started doing anything like the street lamps and that would need to go to the CSC, because that's lighting in the public infrastructure that they're responsible for with the roadways and the essentially like our safe routes to school, our sidewalks, our bike lanes and everything, which we've had kind of ongoing kind of public comments for. So they would have to opine on that. Same with like why we wouldn't have required it explicitly in our public parks, because the Parks Commission would have to opine on modifying the lighting infrastructure in the parks. So, I mean, it definitely would cross multiple commissions in order to do a full implementation just by this ordinance. And so the council policy that would be a separate consideration for them to essentially buy off on is where those recommendations and regulations would live. It's also kind of almost in tandem of, I would imagine that we wouldn't just be replacing a lot of this infrastructure with, like for like and just different Kelvin rating. We would probably, I would hope to do kind of like what the city of Dublin did when they hired Wildan Consulting to do a major infrastructure replacement and installation to take everything to a smart energy efficient city. And that's what they did. So they focused on not really regulating the private property, but rather implementing the infrastructure on public property. So that's kind of like the universal kind of consideration of the application of it to the government facilities, so to speak. But we could, if one of your main concerns is it's just the definition of what a government facility is, we can include a definition at the beginning of the title in order to be able to have that.
I think that would make it clear, because I hear what you're saying about the definition of a government facility, and it's much broader than a building. And so my mind goes directly with lots of street lighting, intersection lighting, and as well.
So
And
it doesn't say here to the greatest practical extent, so it doesn't require the cities. Does that cover what,
that was.
does that cover the flexibility?
When I read on there, I said,
Go through the streetlights, therefore that's exempt.
yes, but when I read on, it said to the greatest practical intent, and I said, well, maybe we're considering that street lighting would be, part of it, but, or part of the ordinance, but whatever, it's just that it's not quite clear to me.
Yeah, so your question is not that you're suggesting street lighting should be included under, you just want it clear that it's not.
Yeah, if that's the intent, I'm fine with the intent, I understand the reasoning.
Ideally, in my perfect world of implementing the cap, also best practices with sustainability as well as creating a resilient community. In theory, we should have battery packed solar street lamps throughout the entire city. They would power themselves, especially when we have a power outage like we did last year. However, we also really value and love redwood trees in the city, and it's going to cast shadows over almost every street lamp we have. So I don't think we want also that to be a part of the conversation, as we would have to essentially deforest all of our large, tall trees in order to not block the solar power for that. So it's kind of one of those things where it's that greatest practical extent. That's what we kind of ran into originally with some of our original kind of solar light deployments for downtown. There's a big section of that we're not going to be able to do because of the buildings that cast shadows onto the street lamps, so they'll never essentially charge enough during the day, fortunately.
I actually like that everything's included with this statement of greatest practical extent. If at some point it becomes practical, change those out, then those will become included. Maybe have the possibility of including everything.
And actually, that's my final question as we look at this. So can we, when we go to the council, can we have a statement on signs, streetlights, city lighting, and parks and sports facilities that they're not covered under this ordinance, to be clear to the council, none of those buckets are, but that the commission encourages or expects, or I don't know how you want to put it, but that these will be covered in future ordinance updates and to the greatest extent possible with budgetary consideration, right?
Yeah. Kind of what we've been consistently doing throughout the zoning code, as well as one chapter is now creating the subsequent action and all the other ones to kind of create cohesiveness throughout the documents so that there's things that aren't in conflict.
I have a question or a comment about the holiday lighting being from October 15th to January 15th. There might be other festivals from different communities that have a slightly different date. For example, Diwali, I know that varies. It could vary from end of September all the way to November. So could we add language in there that allows for that, or extend the period so that we are not, discriminating against? And there might be other examples of communities that have traditional lighting.
Something in one of our version, including with other culture like Chinese New Year's, February, January. Do we have that? I have seen a version that we talk about the cultural things.
Yeah, no, I didn't catch it, but maybe there is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a hard one to navigate. I've dealt with this in Southern California as well, is you can cast the net to be, longer period duration of the year. Or we can kind of say seasonal lighting shall be removed after, 2 weeks post, like, the cultural celebration, essentially. That's what we did in one jurisdiction in Southern California. It's just navigating that to know what is what, is difficult.
So I mean, there should be some language that allows for exceptions. Maybe they have to ask for permission, or maybe it is implicit.
I think there's always a, if I'm not mistaken, there's a clause in here that there's always a conditional permit option.
Yeah, please.
But I don't think any, like, if you're,
I would say this one is, in my 2.5 years, we haven't had a single, hey, my neighbor, it marched and they still have their multicolored twinkle lights up. So I think this might be, maybe it might be a point of indifference for the commission as well as Los Altos. I don't know if we have that as a problem in this jurisdiction, at least now. It might be a moot point, so to speak. So, we can add,
I would recommend adding some language so people know that it's okay to, or if there's a process to do it specifically for different cultural things. Feeling, I don't know if it's Chinese New Year, but I'm feeling like I'm not allowed to, that may be unfair.
Something about that, if there's a modification as approved by Development Services Director. So that may fall into one of these.
That's what he'd like to do.
How impactful is that requirement? It seems very hard to gauge what rights are for what holiday.
impossible, right?
So is it really necessary?
That clause in general?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There was something about temperature for seasonal lighting, 2,700 Kelvin or less, except seasonal lighting. That's where I start to get concerned if we have an exception for brighter lighting, where extending the amount of time or, so I don't know if there was a reasoning for that.
Well, I think to be clear, seasonal lighting typically does not meet dark sky or lighting ordinance standards.
Right.
We're exempting seasonal lighting from those requirements when we make that clause. Otherwise, if we didn't have that clause, seasonal lighting couldn't exist theoretically or not. Seasonal lighting could not exist in Los Altos. So I think the nut of it is we either accept seasonal lighting whenever, and then anybody could say it's just seasonal lighting, and then you kind of have well, I don't think too many people would do that, but your neighbor might, perhaps. Yeah, it's a give or take. It's a tough one, because it is very specific to kind of the traditional time of year, but then
Most communities have some kind of light-related festival around the season, but it varies. So if it accommodates one community and does not accommodate other communities, then it's not fair. So there needs to be a clause in there that accommodates.
what is that clause?
If you're asking my personal professional, I don't think we have a problem in the city for seasonal lighting. I would just say, I think we strike through it. I think this is a carryover from other ordinances where land uses as well as issues of land, aren't the same.
So you just pull it.
Take out those dates?
Yeah, I would strike out, we only mentioned seasonal lighting in 3 locations. I would remove seasonal lighting from the ordinance in its entirety. I just don't think it's necessary.
And I think that's fine, but then what if somebody complains about seasonal lighting?
Then I think we have to really kind of look at that. I think we're.
Yeah, how?
My neighbor has Christmas lights up that don't meet the ordinance. Or they have Chinese New Year
I mean, technically, the way that the ordinance was drafted is that actually the date could actually just be, subsection F can just be removed in its entirety and we can still enforce seasonal lighting. To, you know, that it has to be turned off, that it has to be
It has to be,
it's, I mean,
Put it on timers and turn it off at 11.
yeah, I mean, we could do that, as a part of the, I mean, other provisions is that it's just caught all by all the.
If you remove the dates, then you don't have a problem with what event you're.
yeah, maybe
So
you,
you say seasonal lighting shall be allowed. Period? No. No, that doesn't make sense,
We
right?
really want to achieve dark skies. I think
Yeah,
we need to
that
address.
doesn't, yeah.
well, let's be clear. The objective was not to meet all the standards of dark skies.
Yeah.
That's a very severe ordinance and we don't need to. It's not, but, and again, I don't think any of us have had complaints about seasonal lighting really in the past. So you could say something like seasonal lighting is permitted, holiday lighting, I don't know what you want to call it, seasonal holiday lighting is permitted, but must meet the basic standards of being turned off at 11 and on timers or something, yeah. And we kind of avoid, then it's off at 11 and.
I think that's. Maybe we change seasonal to holiday?
I think, again, I don't know what the appropriate term is, it's either seasonal or holiday.
Because. We have summer seasonal lighting.
I'll just say, a big part of this is also insect health. I mean, if you look closely at outdoor lights, over time, they're gonna accumulate a bunch of dead bugs. And if you have certain bugs that are active during that seasonal time, you're basically saying, sending them to the slaughter, so. I think it's
My
tough to just.
recommendation is that if that would be another iteration or an update, and that there should be like public outreach done on it a little bit more to get, weigh in from the public authority to make.
So you're saying take it out and then try to add it later?
No, I think Carl wants it completely out.
It sounds like that's where we were going, so.
Going with this compromise of the time.
We'll permit it subject to timing and, yeah.
And then maybe later, another iteration, once people get used to the ordinance, then come back and try to take it
try to
down.
eliminate all seasonal lighting.
Well, yeah,
Or make it
I
comply.
think making it comply, I think, is the goal here, making it comply with what we have, yeah.
So we're in agreement though that we will change that term to seasonal light will be permitted subject to, meeting the requirements of the timing, curfews, the lighting curfews.
The seasonal lighting is defined in the ordinance. It's holidays or traditions.
Yeah, so then if we take out the date and add the constraint of curfew,
Okay.
then it'll be fine.
You okay with that, Nick?
Yeah, I was just looking at the dates for Diwali and, as well as Chinese New Year, and actually Diwali we would be safe actually for the next 20 years.
There you go.
Actually, so, and Chinese New Year is always before March, so I guess if you guys really want to make it just very clear and defined as it is, you could say, from September 15th to March 15th, that's your, yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying, is it's like we're getting further and further if we cast the net by dates, so.
Take out the dates and add the curfew.
Okay, that's great.
Any other suggestions or comments?
I just had a question on the applicable, sorry, I'm losing track of where I am here. There was a bit that said, under applicability, E, following lighting and activities are not regulated by this chapter, indoor lighting on its own, dot.
Yeah, that's supposed to be a number 1, Don caught that in his.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, there's some numbering issues just from, the kind of cutting and copying, yeah, from our version.
My other comment was because indoor lighting's not defined. And I mean, obviously it's a small thing. I think most people could infer what indoor lighting is, but I assume there's a definition for it. And then we've defined outdoor lighting, outdoor light fixtures. There's nothing about the location there. Just kind of the types of devices, and then indoor lighting, it's not defined what that is.
I can add affix to the exterior of a building for the outdoor light fixtures. I mean, the indoor lighting, I don't think it's gonna be an enforcement issue, because I think it's kind of self-explanatory, but if you guys want, a definition of some sort, I can create that offline before it goes to council. Up to the commission.
Do we need it defined? What's the feeling? I'm okay with indoor lighting, I do think it's kind of
Indoor, if outdoor says affixed to the exterior, then I think it's kind of implicit. Yeah.
keep it simple.
Are we good with the discussion? What's next after we need to?
So we would move to vote and accept these. Subject to, the modification on the
Define open spaces, government facility.
government facilities, holiday or seasonal lighting, curfew. I think those were the only two exceptions.
I think, yeah, just updating outdoor lighting.
Updating outdoor lighting, and then
Planning government facilities.
For safety, all of these things, definition that Don was talking about.
Oh,
Yeah.
cleaning up the language on, cleaning up the language act, yes.
and then making it clear to council about government buildings.
Making, well, I think making a message or, intent clear that it will cover signs, city, private signs, streetlights, city lighting upon budgetary constraint, and parks and sports facilities when those ordinances come up.
There's a really small proofreading thing I could mention if necessary at this juncture. Under outdoor security lighting, there's no space between the number 5 and minutes.
Good catch.
If we didn't see that.
I move to approve both of these ordinances,
I second.
subject to what we just talked about. And I don't think I can repeat it, but we'll make sure it's in there.
All in favor of approving the ordinance to go to council, at a later date and with the edits that we just discussed? Raise your hand. Okay, motion passes. And did the commission need to make a vote to like speak or anything, or?
So do we need to vote, like, if they want Xiaopeng and I to represent this at the council?
If you want to speak on behalf of the commission or anything like that, you would have to vote now.
So I move to enable Xiaopeng and I, and anybody else who wants to, when it does come to council, that we are supported by you to speak on behalf of the commission.
The only clarification is it's just based on the recommendation that you guys have. It's kind of implicit, but it's.
I won't speak about other things.
Yeah, you can't go, but Carl wanted us to do this. It's what the majority vote was. It's not explaining what could have happened. Essentially, that's the only clarification.
Suggest that we nominate the subcommittee to speak on behalf of the environmental commission.
More familiar with the details.
So does everyone vote yes to allow Commissioner Hecht and Lou to speak on behalf of the commission when this goes to council? Raise your hand in favor. Okay, motion passes.
Okay, commissioners' reports and
Oh, quick
comments.
question. So when so we do want to do a little outreach in advance. So as soon as you know the date, we'll probably start working on the outreach plan now that we know the nature of the ordinances. I'll talk to you about that, Tanya. Champagne and I will talk to you exactly what we're gonna do or how we do it. And then any idea of when this would go to council?
Talk to the city clerk. Sorry, last night there was an item continued, so I need to.
It won't be like in the next week or two, would it? Okay. That's fine. I just wanna, rough timing is all we can do. So as long as it's not in the next 2 weeks, we can start. Okay.
Commissioners' reports and comments? Council meetings? Oh, sorry.
One request, could you, kind of distribute the dates or new selection of dates for representatives, for city council attendance? I
Yeah,
know I've seen it, but
yeah, I think.
not on the.
We have the old one.
Think about it somewhere, because
I can go, want me to call them out?
Or for at least,
I have to go to the next one.
at least for the next month.
Okay, so I'll tell you who was responsible for the prior month. Bruno was responsible for September 10th. He's not here, so we'll miss that. I was responsible for September 24th, and can give you a very quick readout on that one. October 8th, Rashina. October 22nd, Lou. November 12th is TBD, so I assume that'll be one of the new commissioners.
And you can just reassign, you can just assign them.
You want to sign that right now?
That one, yeah.
Fine.
But that's until, that's through the end of the year.
Yeah.
So we'll do that all again in January.
But we should get somebody on for November 12th.
Correct. Yeah, but I think,
And so the nature of those are we either attend or listen in on the video to the, council. And we only highlight, environmental council related items back to the group, so we're all on the same page of something we might have missed. And so that's, the objective is to capture those things that are discussed there that we might have missed.
Okay, just kind of listening and note taking.
Yes. Oh, and again, only for, environment, there's a ton of stuff at a council meeting, we only want to hear about the
I can do, it's this Saturday, right? Next,
November 12th.
November 12th.
Yeah, sorry.
they're Tuesdays. There was on a Tuesday every 2 weeks.
And Carl, you're December 10th.
What time, 6 or 7? 7? Yeah, I can do that.
And if you can't, you can always listen online. It's usually posted within a day.
So you don't have to, yeah, I guess you don't have to go, and they're live as well, so you can listen from home.
In the chambers or?
In person, it's in the chambers in City Hall, and then online, it's just the city to, it's right away.
The council was right away. Yeah, it's very quick.
Unless there's a
So they do
technical
it live.
issue or something,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then oh, sorry. I was gonna say I did cover the 24th.
I can speak for the September 10th meeting, because I listened to it. And so a few other people did. We were given that homework by the mayor to do that. So my notes from that is, there was a discussion about the electrification subcommittee proposals, and we talked about that last week, so I'm not going to go into detail on that, but a couple of the comments from different council members. Councilmember Liger was disappointed that our proposals were not bold enough, but I don't think she was speaking specifically just to the electrification. I think there was some confusion that report out was for overall CAP actions as opposed to electrification CAP actions, which Laura spoke to over there. But that was the guidance from a couple of people that we need to be bolder in our proposals. Where's my other note? And then there was a note of a couple of discussions on the budget and that the money that would go in for hiring a consultant, which was approved, would be separate from money that potentially could come for incentives. And there was a lot of guidance to look into incentives and ways of, rather than penalizing, carrots rather than sticks. To help with better communication. And the one direction, and, Mayor, please correct me, was, for staff, and then the city manager suggested that, the environmental commission, get into that, is look into incentives, other incentives for electrification, including direct rebates, lower fees lower development fees, subsidies, whatever else. So I think that was the one direction which I think maybe, and I think some of this was part of when we discussed it, the intention of the subcommittee under item number 3, which was provide incentives from the city. What went up was just the increased FAR, but under that sub-bullet, we had talked about a few different things, including giving priority timing and how else we could incentivize that. So maybe that's something, if someone else can come on this subcommittee, we could flesh that out and then present it next month and then close out the subcommittee. So I'm kind of merging the two report outs.
Yeah, we can move to that on the subcommittee.
So that's my report on that. And then on October 9th, or whichever, the 8th, the one, I don't think there was anything particular to do with environmental. There was a lot of discussion on the rezoning the districts, and there were a couple other things, appointment of commissioners, etc. I don't think anything pertinent to the environmental commission.
Good, and I watched the 24th, really nothing environmentally related except for our former member Laura did give a very strong editorial comment that's worth watching. I believe she said she would also send an email, which I have not seen. I don't know if it's attached to a future council package if she did that, but she did give a fairly strong editorial that's worth watching. And I think the bottom line is, as she was leaving, she felt like the council had not given us strong enough guidance, had given us very thin lines to work within, and virtually no budget. And so the comments from the prior meeting seemed out of line and surprising to us. But I think it's an ongoing dialogue, and I think we'll figure it out as we plan for next year.
I'll add one other thing about the meeting that you covered under future agenda items.
That's what I forgot to mention.
You go ahead.
So there were 2 future agenda items that might be of interest. One was an e-bike ordinance, more related to safety. I know in the CAP, we had, one of the action was to promote e-bikes. So we kind of have to balance that out with how the safety factor, but we still want to, promote the, people switching to bicycling, whether it's e-bike or man-powered bike, human-powered bike. And then the second thing was to take a look at the CAP as first thing for the new council to do when they get in. And there was some discussion whether it should be, should the word be look at the CAP or to review the status of the CAP. And I think the direction was not to look at the CAP with the view of changing it, but just review it and see where we are at, how we can move forward. So that's something that should be coming January, I'm guessing, or whenever it's planned. So I'm assuming that the commission
you put together was kind of intentional to sometimes
Right.
help to
Right.
build it so that it's not just fully just staff, but also, well, yes, staff predominantly giving you a lot of the like the GHG inventory, some of the other identifiers of big projects that are going on or that will be going on in the very near future. And for us to kind of have that report, very much similar to kind of mirroring what we do for the housing element implementation one, which if you've looked at that at the bottom of every city council, it's just an informational item attachment. Obviously, like with this table, we would probably cut off, the costs and, certain things like that. So it's a little bit more simplified for the commission once we have it like as a working document. But that was like the intention, is so that we kind of have more something interface instead of on the shelf, you know, so to speak.
Yeah. So I think when we work on the, work plan, next month, we also look at, you know, how, and the guidance would be that we need to be bold. I'm assuming that's the guidance. Yeah, did I miss anything about the 2 points? Yeah.
I have one thing to report, on the Bay Area Air Quality Management District is holding a public appliance rules, public learning session. And, this is gonna be, anybody can sign up in a webinar, but it's October 22nd from 5 to 7:30, 6 to 7:30. And it's by Zoom. I've sent it to you. I don't know if you forwarded it to the commissioners, but this is how they're gonna, the first public learning session about their appliance rule, which is what.
We'll see it.
So just a reminder, I think it'll be something of interest because that's what we're gonna be dealing with.
Staff updates? Oh, wait, sorry, ad hoc subcommittee reports, so
Yeah.
I kind of spoke to whatever there was. Unfortunately, we lost both. The others, ad hoc committee members, so I'm wondering what the process is on getting more. Do we have to put that on an agenda item and then come back next time, or can we just see if anybody wants to volunteer now?
I also, need more clarification on what you're wondering we would be working on.
So specifically just the direction from, the council to staff, and then the discussion that the city manager had with looping in the environmental commission to look into other incentives for electrification, including direct rebates, lower fees, subsidies, whatever else we could come up with. So that just specific fleshing out that piece. I think if we can just move forward and continue and finish that off, then we can, look at other broader things for the next work plan.
So would that be in addition to what the RFP we're putting out?
That would be separate from the RFP. That would be, like we had 5 recommendations. I think this would go under recommendation number 3 as a broader thing, which was incentives. So you take out the, FAR increase, but we put in other, and highlight those. I think we'll just take a little bit of discussion and a little bit of fleshing out.
More incentives, actually.
Yeah, we can put that out and then at least, move forward with that.
So can we sign the new commissioners to the, electrification?
Or, like, even the ones that aren't here?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that they want to be volunteering themselves, rather than
Yeah.
be volunteered, so.
I mean, I would actually like to volunteer for that, because I think
That'd be
it's
great.
aligned with my professional experience.
That's great, that's great. Anyone else? Just for 1 month? A couple.
At the next
Yeah,
meeting,
I don't.
see if Commissioner would like to join that.
Yeah, I think next month we would.
Okay.
I
Anyone else want to?
in the meantime, I, gotta close up
Okay.
Dark Skies.
So in the meanwhile, Paul and I can, see if we can flesh out some stuff. We'll talk to them. Okay, Dark Skies, or do we need any other reports beyond what we already talked about? Staff updates?
Just that, we talked about it earlier already, but the single-use plastics is, we're gonna be taking that hopefully 10/22.
Potential future agenda items?
Electrification fair? Electrification fair?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
On the Planning
Yes,
Commission.
my update, yes.
Oh, yeah, sorry, that's, it's not listed here.
Okay, Greentown is making progress, on being able to organize that. They are trying to arrange a coalition partner meeting in the next 10 days. They are, volunteering themselves to come to the next, meeting to talk about their plans, more remotely. So that offer is, out there.
So let's come to the next commission meeting and explain their plans.
Yeah,
Excellent.
Agenda item. Wait, did we have any staff updates or did I?
No,
Blank.
just the single-use plastics.
We have one, future agenda item. Is there
And then,
anything
I don't know, do we need to agendaize the closing out the communication plan or outreach plan?
Yes, I have that already. Just real quick though, do we need to, is it just gonna be an update or?
it could be more substantial, subject to what they bring.
We have community outreach, the 2025 work plan, EV fair.
either of these two things coming up that we have already? The SEC
Sorry?
update and the Cal Water update? They just,
Yes. That would be, they're already on there, so that's something that we would discuss as the, staff liaison and chair on whether they would be coming up in the next meeting or not. November is the last meeting before December, the break. So, anything that we would want to discuss to prepare for January and the new year kind of things, but yeah.
work plan will be a pretty heavy.
Good question, is it, would we need, is there like a deadline to get the work plan kind of finalized by? If so, what is that? That'd be
We're
the
looking
November.
to do it in November. Last year, we took the work plan in February, so we had an extra meeting to kind of fix it, but we don't know yet when it will go exactly, so we're aiming to get up in November.
Short. Would we be able to go offline and let people send you comments if we're not 100%? Would we be voting on the work plan at the next meeting? Is that?
No, you voted on it in January.
Okay, so, yeah, so we get all the input.
The new mayor will have to establish when it's actually coming, when the, commissions all do the meeting, like we did this year.
Yeah.
We have one more meeting to fine tune it. We'll get the bulk of it, but we'll look at it and finalize it in January. So that, I'll say better.
I was just gonna say, it'd be best to refer to the fair electrification fair, if we can, just because as we've discussed, that's sort of the direction it's moving, and that's certainly where Greentown is looking as well, so. Just so they don't have to dance around that term when they, come. Yeah.
I'll put it as EV fair parentheses for a couple times.
Okay, yeah, that works.
Thanks.
I will be able to walk.
Walk?
Yeah, I'm close to it.
Oh,
Yeah.
closer to the.
Yeah.
Downtown. Carl smoking. Thank you, Tanya.